nervous and thrilled to be able to speak to you today. Nervous because I was never great at the English language since a young age. And thrilled because I read your writing, and actually I read the commencement speech first that you wrote, and then after that realized that it was the same writer, it was you.
Yeah, same person.
Yeah, and so welcome to the show, Adrian.
Thanks, Brian. It's a very interesting place you have here.
Yeah, so I mean, if you were to take a stab at describing your upbringing, like during your childhood, how would you describe it?
So it was a very post 1965 upbringing. I was born in 1966, 1 year after independence, and both my parents were teachers, and they moved to an HDB in Commonwealth Close, Block 81. It was one of the tallest blocks in Singapore. It had 16 stories, and that was it was so remarkable that people would refer to it by its height, Zap Lak Lau. So if you tell the taxi driver, "Oh, take me to Zap Lak Lau, take me to 16 stories," they will know straight away that it's this HDB block.
Oh wow!
Yes.
So that is the newest and tallest.
At that time, it was like totally state of the art. Every 5 floors there was a lift landing. It was really awesome. And we had a common corridor. We had 2 bedrooms. We had 1 bathroom and this kitchen, galley style kitchen. And then we had these louvers into the corridor. So when my dad became the first person to buy a television on his floor, then we'd watch TV, and then all the neighbors would be outside on the corridor looking in through the louver windows.
No way! And back then, was it already color or still black and white?
No, it was like black and white, and then my dad would say it was color. Can't you see it? What's wrong with you? And I'll be like, oh, gee, something wrong with my eyes. Then we had the first telephone. It was a dial telephone from Singapore Telecoms at that time. It was we had 5 numbers, 5 digits or 6 digits or something. It was really very primitive. And then people would use our telephone. So we have this whole row on 99K. That was my floor. So everybody on floor K, they would use our phone. So I'll be in at home, somebody would ring, and then they'll say, "I want to speak to so-and-so." Then I'll run out and knock on the neighbor's door and say, "Oh, there's a phone call for you." Then they'll come over and use the phone.
Wow. So was that a business, like turned into a business thing, or was it just community?
It's all very communal. So when you live in an HDB block with a common corridor, you get to know everyone, and there's a lot of sharing involved. So if somebody cooks something, everybody knows what you're cooking, and then you have to share. So you have to cook extra. On the other hand, you can always borrow stuff from people, watch their TV, use their phones. My neighbor 2 doors down was my nanny, or she looked after me and my brother when my parents went off to work. So she was a washerwoman, but she also spent her time being a nanny. And then the person downstairs baked bread. So in their HDB flat, they actually had a huge charcoal oven, and they literally made bread and sold it out of their flat.
Which by today's standard would be a fire.
Completely illegal, fire hazard. Then you'd have like Facebook complaints and public shaming and stuff like that. But in those days, we just ate the bread.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
So I have a younger brother. He's 3 years younger than me. He's a creative person, very creative. Does a lot of stuff, travels all around the world.
Would you say then your parents, are they the English teacher, and hence?
So they were primary school teachers. Okay. I don't know how much influence they had. Obviously, every parent would have some influence over their kids. But I think we were raised by all our neighbors, and we spent a lot of time with them and on our own.
Yeah, no, I mean the reason why I asked it was because you picked up the English language.
Yes, that happened only because I went to the right school. So when I was in Commonwealth Close, our whole floor, for some reason, was all Hainanese. Mostly there were people there who spoke Hainanese. I think they were from the same village or something. We were resettled. There was only one person on the floor who didn't speak Hainanese, and she spoke Cantonese, and we all regarded her with suspicion. It's like, oh, she speaks Cantonese. And then my parents went to ballot me, and I got into ACS. And the first day I came back, I told my mom, everyone in school speaks English, and which I found very strange. The fact that I went to ACS changed my life. I think it was a very good school, and it gave me a lot of opportunities. It made me meet a lot of people who are not from my part of the world, and it gave me ideas and ambitions. So I'm very unhappy if the good schools are kept away from the rest of Singapore. Right now, all our schools, the good schools, are put in Bukit Timah, and it's surrounded by upper middle class people who live in private property, and the kids there start to form their own elite community, and it's very hard for the rest of Singapore to break in. So if you're in the heartlands and you want an opportunity to see what life is like on the other side of the tracks, you may not get that nowadays. When I went to ACS, I was living in a 3-room flat, and I went to my classmate's house. I had a lot of friends, and they were very nice people. I went to their house and thought, wow, this is awesome. This is not this house is on the ground. They don't live in the sky. They have gardens. They have like places where they can put cars, and then they have places for useless things like a fountain, a pond. They have people who work there for them, like a gardener, and it made me want to explore that life, and it made me want to see how could I get that life. Now, if I was not in ACS, if I was in a neighborhood school, I think I might have a narrower outlook on life. So I think it's a good thing if elite schools. In fact, I want a law where a certain percentage of places in elite schools are given to people who are completely from a different social strata.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fascinating because HDB have a law where we need to have a certain amount percentage of race.
That's right, good point. Why not apply it to schools as well? In fact, we don't even have a race quota in schools. When I went to Hwa Chong in the 1980s, that's when after ACS, AC, Anglo-Chinese primary school, then the secondary school, and then I went to Hwa Chong, which is a whole different story. And there, it was as Chinese as can be. They made school announcements in Chinese. The school song was in Chinese. When the school played at sports, people cheered in Chinese. And if you wanted to ask a girl out, it's Chinese, and then you sit around a campfire holding hands. It's very not ACS. Anyway, they had a Malay language school, Malay language club there. There were non-Chinese people. My friends in Hwa Chong were not Chinese. They were Eurasians, Indians, Malays. But I worry now that Hwa Chong, or I shouldn't name names, but schools may be all one race. Then kids can grow up from beginning to end and become adults, and they never meet somebody who's of a different religion, different race, or speaks different, from a different social background. That's a terrible way to grow up.
I mean, that problem will be solved once they enter NS.
Yes,
but for the males part only.
Yes, that's right. For boys, in theory, you would go to NS and you would mix with every level of society. But we know it's not true, right? If you have good academic results, if you're a scholar, or if you're from, in my time it was called the A levers.
It's still called the A levels.
They still call it A levels.
Yeah.
Okay, good, because
oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
Right, I'm lost track, but it sounds like that. Thanks. So IB, I presume they would put everybody from A levels, my time, in one group, so we wouldn't mix with people from other groups, and so in theory, national service is supposed to be the great leveler. It's the benefit that we're supposed to get from NS. But in practice, I'm not sure that we meet people from all over Singapore. Anyway, 18 is a bit too late to start mixing around. We got to get Singaporeans at primary school or preschool to start having Muslim friends, Hindu friends, atheist friends, and friends who are Chinese, Malay, Indians. If we have race quotas in HDB flats, and that's a good idea, if we have race quotas in GRCs so that our politicians are of a good mix, why not have them in schools? We don't have them.
I mean, you make a good point with that. I'm thinking that the race quota, the reason why it's got started is because of racial cohesion,
That's right.
right?
Exactly.
So right now, do you find that we still have that problem? Because then the reason was for that.
Well, it's a good time to ask that question because we're amending our constitution to say that we need to safeguard minority status to make sure that the president of Singapore can sometimes be from another race, not from the majority race.
Yeah.
And that's because there's a real concern that maybe Singaporeans will tend to vote according to racial lines. I don't believe it, but some people think that's the case. I think it's quite heartening if you look at something like the latest Yahoo poll about who would be Prime Minister of Singapore. And far and away, Singaporeans chose Tharman Shanmugaratnam as being their choice for being Prime Minister, even though he's not Chinese. And I think they don't even think of Tharman as Chinese. They don't think of him as anything but just a competent Singaporean person. And maybe Singaporeans are becoming more race blind. We ought to go in that direction.
Which is a good thing.
I think it's a great thing.
So with that being said, then
Yes.
maybe they can relook into the whole race quota thing in HDB, where is it something that they still need to uphold, or I mean it's just something to relook into. I don't think that if there's no need, then we don't need to change it. We don't change what's not broken.
It's the perfect time to ask this question because either the race quota is very important, in which case don't just stop at HDB estates, but apply it to schools. Or we've outlived it, in which case don't apply it to schools, but take it out of HDB.
Wow, it just got to the politics side, which will come by in one of the I really love talking about this. It's just that I just need to do some preammunition saying that like I'm not the best person to talk about politics. Just if I were to ask questions like pardon me.
I actually didn't intend to talk about politics. I was talking about growing up. Sorry about that. I sort of went off.
No, I would love to talk about it. It's just that when I spoke to Loretta, which
Yes.
your mutual friend, right?
Yes.
And then I was like, what is MVP thing? So
Right.
she in the interview gave me a lesson on what MVP is.
Well,
So we might need to come to that if we
back to Commonwealth Close. So I lived there until I was primary 3, went to Telok Blangah. Telok Blangah was a weird new town as well.
Quick question there.
Yes.
Commonwealth Close. So you were educated on English or Mandarin or dialect?
So it was English because I went to ACS. ACS is an English
So ACS is the secondary.
it was primary as well.
Oh, it's primary as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So when were you in Commonwealth from? Is it?
I was in Commonwealth Close. That's my address.
Oh, okay.
That was where my flat
primary
was.
school is already
In
ACS,
ACS,
and
that's
then
right.
secondary school ACS
That's
as
correct.
well.
Yeah.
Okay, got it now.
Yeah. So I went to the before that I was in the PAP kindergarten. So I was indoctrinated from a very young age. It was a great kindergarten. I met a lot of people there, very interesting friends. It's this whole idea of you have a kindergarten where you actually learn things versus playing around. So I have this opinion of modern preschool as being a lot of it's a lot very play oriented, but the PAP kindergarten, as you can expect, is all about like learning stuff and having exams and being graded. And I think that's important in a school system. So I'm not in favor of people talking about school in a very soft and fluffy way.
No, I think both are important. In fact, I think I recently read that like Elon is self-schooling his little ones. Yeah, and he basically, the idea of intriguing them with how to do this. Then while learning how to solve this problem, they learn the necessary skill that is needed.
Yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah. That's something we need to improve on.
Correct. And which is also what I think Kevin is doing here with Dylan.
Right.
Actually, I didn't manage to get you to meet Dylan, but Dylan's fascinating. So Kevin also like spent time with his child. I think in a 3 to 5 year span, Dylan went on 2 TEDx talk, a 2,000 word essay on Esquire, as well as a successfully funded Kickstarter campaign.
Wow.
All below the age of, I would like to say, 14, 15. Right?
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Right. That's early start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not saying that his academic wouldn't be, is nothing to be shouted for,
Well, actually,
but the rest,
that's where I don't know, because if you have people who are homeschooled, I worry that they don't socialize. And
also he's not homeschooled.
okay, and the other thing is, I do think it's important to measure how fast children are developing. Yeah. So after that, I went to Telok Blangah. I moved there.
Do you, the predisposition to the English language,
Right.
when did you figure it out? Or did you even figure it out at all?
That's from ACS. That's something. The school at that time was very careful about how you learned English. So the teachers spoke very well, and they were careful to teach us how to use English properly. Now I don't want to criticize people, but my friends have kids. I don't have kids, and one of the things they observed was that the teachers who teach their kids have worse English than their kids. The teachers don't speak properly and they can't write properly, and that's a worry. I think in ACS it was important that we learn English properly, and from that point I realized, first, when I went back and told my mom everybody speaks English, I realized that, oh, it's pretty important and I should learn to use it well, and if I can use it well, I can influence more people. So it's a great tool. People think that language is just a way of communicating. It's more than that. It's also a badge. The listener immediately forms an impression of where you are in his world. And if you use language properly, you can get a lot more done. You can change things.
Do you see it then already, like what you say, or how?
I thought it was powerful, and I thought that it was interesting, and my parents were very supportive because they gave me things to read. So there was no internet in those days, so I just had to read whatever I could find. Books were expensive. Singapore in those days, if you wanted to buy a paperback book, it would be something like $12. And that was a lot of money in those days.
And we equate $12.
Well, $12 I think would be today something like $40. Right, for a book. And then you read it, and then there were no second-hand bookstores, so you had to buy it new, and then you had to keep it. And my parents weren't rich, so I had to figure out ways to read stuff, to learn stuff. So I would then end up reading stuff that my father had lying around, which may not have been age appropriate. But in those days, you just read whatever you can.
But your father then was also reading English.
Oh, right.
books.
Yes. His English is good, was good. Plus, in those days, the newspapers were better written. The Straits Times was very well written. You couldn't spot many errors in the Straits Times. And today, I think there's a lot more content, and it's quite interesting, but I don't think they edit it as carefully. So if you wanted to learn English from reading the Straits Times, you would have problems. Kids today have a lot more opportunities, but they have to be more discriminating about what they want to read if they want to improve their language. So those days I read whatever my father had on hand, which was thrillers, some stuff that was a bit political, I think, before when Singapore was independent. And things like 1984, George Orwell, which probably was not good for someone in primary school to read.
Yeah. No. Would you think that your ability or your flair towards the English language is natural talent, or?
I get you. Okay. I think a lot of it can be inculcated. So I believe you can get hold of reasonably smart kids and give them the materials and teach them how to write well and speak well and read the right things. And after a while, I think most of them get it.
But for you yourself?
Um, well, for
Because
me,
you wrote the teenage textbook and I just reread it again
Oh.
and was like, wow, this is actually
Thanks.
you know, because back in the days when I was teenager,
Yes.
when I read it, I probably wouldn't appreciate
you're
as much
still
as
a teenager. No.
yes.
Right. So I'll tell you about that.
Yeah.
So when I was in national service, um, at that time we were paid something like $200 a month or $300 a month, and it's very hard to get by with that type of salary allowance. And I gave tuition, so I had to go to people's houses and teach. At first, I taught the electric organ. I'm very bad. I learned a little bit of it and then I taught somebody. It was a complete failure, right? So I started teaching English and English literature. Oh man, it's really tough. So I was making $200 a month from the army, national service allowance, and then weekends would be like $200 for tuition, and it didn't work. So I started writing articles instead, and I got paid 15 cents a word to write for magazines. So I have pseudonyms, and I pretend to be a woman or a professional guy working and having opinions about things, and getting paid every month, something like $400-500 a month. One day, this chap meets me. His name is Goh Ek Keng, and he was a publisher. And he said, "Oh, I read some of your stuff. Would you like to write a book?" So I said, "Okay, why not, right?" And he says, "Okay, you've got to write a novel, which is fiction." And I never write fiction. It's like really tough to imagine stuff. And I said, I have no idea what to write about. He says, "Okay, first, you can write about something you know." And all I knew was the army. I just did national service. So that wasn't very useful because Michael Chung just wrote a book called Army Days. And his book defined national service for that time. And I didn't want to write the same thing that he was writing. And I wasn't working. So the only experience I could fall back on, which I could write on, was junior college. The whole experience of being in a single-sex school and then going to junior college and meeting girls. So I decided to write about that.
And this was after the army or
When I was doing national service.
Oh wow.
That's
okay.
right, yes.
And like we're looking at writing at night
So
or just the weekend?
So when I finished national service, that was the time I started writing. But then I had to go to university to study law. So I really began seriously writing during my first year of university.
Okay.
Yes.
Wait, so let's rewind back the question whereby the predisposition to the
Yes.
English language.
Yes.
Natural talent, or you think that's something that you
So I think
cultivate?
it's environmental. I think it's environmental. I think if you want, we can do an experiment. We kidnap some kids from somewhere, and third world country or somewhere, and then we put them in these like giant vacuum sealed rooms, and one watches, let's say, lots of kung fu movies,
Right.
and one watches lots of Bollywood, and one watches lots of British comedy or something. Eventually, I think they will develop according to their environment. So the guy who watches British comedy will end up speaking a certain way and having his thinking shaped that way. Bollywood different, and Kung Fu person would be different.
So I knew there's a story whereby so that when you move into Hwa Chong,
Yes.
then the Chinese part
Yes.
is something that you struggle upon.
It's terrible. So the thing about Anglo-Chinese school, where I studied for 10 years, is that it's all Anglo and there's no Chinese in it. It's just an English-educated school. Everybody there spoke great English and thought in English. I think your thought process is shaped by your language. Nobody spent a lot of time on Chinese. That's wrong. I don't recommend it. I think that's a bad thing. but that's how we turned out. So at the end of secondary four, the government had a scheme. Governments always have these schemes where they change people's lives. And the government said, oh, Singapore needs more people to study the humanities. Right? Great, I agree. We still do. But what was the government's great idea? Did they say, okay, so everyone who's good in the humanities, we will give them scholarships to study humanities? Did they say that? No. They said, oh, we will get people who study science and give them the opportunity to study humanities. Then we're like, oh, what about the people who already are studying humanities? Won't they be in a better position to take advantage of this opportunity? Because the government was investing in bringing the best teachers from overseas, setting up the best programs to make sure that we send students to the UK to study in Oxford and Cambridge and to do English language, politics, economics, and stuff like that. And they wanted to give this wonderful humanities opportunity to science students. I know, and I was one. And why was I a science student? It's because in Singapore, somehow parents have got this idea that if you study science, maths, or something, you're a lot smarter, you have better prospects, versus if you study arts or commerce or something. Right? It's completely wrong. All right, that's a very bad way of thinking. You'll screw up your child's future. But it comes about because our education system shows value by saying people who score well, we are going to stream them, and we are going to put them in classes where it's science heavy or maths heavy. And people who don't do as well, we'll let them study something easier. Like what? Oh, like history, like geography, like economics, like literature. That's so easy, right? Compared to 1 + 1, so difficult. Anyway, because of that policy, I ended up doing science and maths. I'm not a big fan of it. And after that,
Back to Chinese.
Yes.
Hwa Chong.
Yes. So I went to Hwa Chong because of the humanities scholarship. This is a giant detour. Right? And the whole interview is going to be like this, just to warn you.
Okay.
Right. I hope we have enough time.
We have. I have.
Yes. So I went to Hwa Chong because I was told, and it was true, that they had very good teachers from the UK to teach us and prepare us to have a university course in England. But it was situated, this island of British education was situated in this huge Chinese junior college. So there were all these conflicts between the UK teachers and the administration of Hwa Chong, which was very different-minded. And I went there and I realized, first off, that for the first time in my life, I would have to make friends with people who didn't naturally have English as a first language. So what I mean is they won't watch English movies, they won't listen to English music, and they won't even talk to you in English. Because I'm Chinese by
So
race.
needless to say, you have a hard time making friends too. Because of language?
Well,
No.
I made friends eventually because we can get past those things. I think, but we've got to put people in that situation where you meet people from different backgrounds. But my Chinese is still crap.
But needless to say, you did manage to scrape through enough to get by.
Yes,
Hwa Chong.
I failed my Chinese the first time, and it was not a boring failure. It was a spectacular, world-class failure. The sort of failure that like Chinese teachers from other classes would come and just look at me and think, "Oh man, this is the guy who screwed our JC." So it was a spectacular failure. It's really bad. It's like F9.
Is that like the A-level situation or J1?
So I have to pass my Chinese to get into university, and I almost didn't. I had to take it many times. So people in Hwa Chong, Chinese is like drinking water. So they do their higher Chinese, or S paper as we call it, like 3 months went into a 2-year course, they pass it and they get a distinction. And I'm like, no, I'm not even doing the higher Chinese. I'm just trying to scrape through. And I fail and I fail and I fail.
But
And
you had enough, you didn't like retain in a year though.
no.
Okay,
no,
well that's
the system was a lot kinder in those days. I think because we departed from some of the thinking during Lee Kuan Yew's earlier bilingual policy era, where he equated being good at 2 languages to IQ, which is it's a completely different skill set. Anyway, the upshot is that I had friends who had to drop out of Hwa Chong because they couldn't pass their Chinese. So they were good in everything else, but just because of one subject, they had to drop out. And I think that's a terrible shame.
so you just managed to sort of just scrape through.
Scrape through.
Okay.
Yes.
By just memorizing like idioms and.
You know, there are so many techniques. Correct. So you can memorize like the opening of any essay, and so whatever essay topic that comes up, you will whack in your universal standard introduction, which is in this life there are many issues, and sometimes when we are confronted with situations that we have not experienced before, we can only apply the lessons that we have learned by our parents. And that takes up half the essay. Then the beginning, then the ending bit, you can say like through this experience, I've learned that I must trust in my elders and blah blah. So that's universal ending. So it's like that iPhone 7 kind of plug, the lightning plug to your headphones. You have that adapter, and then you can use the adapter for anything.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The middle bits were horrible. Yeah.
And during then it was the time also you went into debating.
Oh, I like debating. Yes, I did it a little bit in ACS, and in Hwa Chong, but I did most of it when I was in university. And in Singapore, it used to be a lot more fun to debate. It's a lot more serious now. I judge some debate competitions. Our young people are very smart. They're very articulate. But there's a bit more to debating than that. So they need to know a lot of stuff, and they need to be persuasive. Being persuasive is different from being argumentative. Being argumentative is I say something and then you contradict me. I say something, you contradict me. And then you show that everything I say is wrong. That's an argument. But you're not going to change my mind. So Donald Trump can say 10 things, and I can prove to you that everything that he says is a complete and utter lie. And on top of that, I can prove to you that he's a bad person. That's an argument. I may still not persuade you to vote against him or to vote for somebody else. So debate is all about persuasion, not argument. So it's something that we're lacking, I think, when we look at our debate scene, which is a whole hour of discussion.
No, I let me just dive in a little bit because I really love that topic of persuasion.
Yes.
What do you like? How can one be more persuasive? Learn to be more persuasive.
Right. So the art of persuasion, which is something I have to do in court when I sue people, as a litigator. The art of persuasion is not about asking who's right or who's wrong. It's not even asking about the facts. It's about trying to figure out what people want. What people want. Everybody wants something. And once you know what that person wants, then you're able to understand his perspective. So some people want truth, some people want justice, some people want money, some people want sympathy, some people want security, friendship, love, stuff like that. Everybody wants something. And when that affects their perspective of any issue. When you look at our national policies, or you even look at which football team people support, they come from a perspective of what they're lacking in themselves and what they want. So the first step in anything, even a relationship, especially a relationship, find out what the other person wants. And also, before you start, you got to know what you want. And it takes a whole lifetime to figure out what you want.
Isn't that the hardest part?
It is the hardest part. Then the second layer is, once you know what you want, never let people know what you want.
It's like a poker.
Yes, it's not because you're deceitful or dishonest. It's just because once people know what you want, you are their tool. They can manipulate you. They can use that information against you. Or it just becomes very awkward if you want the wrong stuff. So if I want world peace or democracy or money, it's something only my closest friends would know.
Yeah, I don't know whether is this like a professional lawyer sort of hazard, professional hazard.
Oh,
Because I did spoke to a few lawyers before,
yes.
and they seem to be a lot more guarded than the rest of the other
It's true.
profession.
It is the legal profession is a profession where we have to weigh our words. Everything we say, we assume has some significance. So we can't ever waste any words. So that comes across as being guarded. It's hard even to do an interview, especially an interview on camera, because I have to remove some of the barriers that I have and be less self-conscious and actually give you information.
Yeah, well, also just to let you know, you have the final edits.
Well,
So if anything,
you heard that.
yeah, I that's how I encourage people to be more open.
I think that works because
Hopefully,
by doing that, Brian, you actually are knowing what the interview subject wants, which is sometimes that person wants privacy, and sometimes he wants to protect his image, and so by saying that, you're actually addressing what he wants, so it makes him feel better. So back to debating, yeah, that's the whole thing. The whole idea of persuading is, if I'm debating somebody, most of the time I'm not trying to convince the person I'm debating with. I'm convincing a third party. So I have to figure out what the third party wants, and then address that in my argument with you. Yeah, so many moving parts.
right, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it almost also seems that like the third party, you're playing a guessing game as well.
Correct. So the first rule in litigation is know your judge, and in debate it's know your audience, and in writing it's know your reader. A lot of people say I write for myself, and I mean to an extent that's true, but when you write for yourself, what are you trying to achieve? It's just some catharsis. Gopal Baratham, one of our earlier fiction writers, he came to Hwa Chong once and he lectured. He was a brain surgeon, and he wrote fiction. And then I, at that time, was very interested in writing, so I spoke to him. And he said, well, do you write anything? I said, yeah, but I don't really want to publish it. It's very personal. I just write it and I keep it in a drawer. Then he looked at me and he says, well, then that's just masturbation. And I still remember it. I thought, well, yeah, it seems quite pointless if I write something and keep it there. But then if I write something and I want other people to read it, why do I want people to read it? Well, obviously, I want them to enjoy themselves. And maybe I want them to listen to my message and agree with it. I want them to be persuaded. In which case, I'm not writing for myself anymore. I'm writing for another person. So if I'm going to write for another person, then I better know what's important to that person.
Actually, I mean, funny that you mention it, because I feel a lot of that when I reread the teenage textbook.
Oh, thanks. Tell me.
Yeah, I feel that the way of how you write it, in the sense of the economy of words, is put into such concise detail. Almost, another author I remember, it's like Murakami, writes very concisely too, where he actually delivers a lot of information, and every paragraph is written in such a way where it have a little twist, and it makes things interesting, not by the page, but by the paragraph.
Thanks. I'm not worthy to be compared to Murakami, but I appreciate your observations. When I was writing, I imagined myself talking to somebody who was constantly distracted. So in those days, there were no handphones, but you can imagine trying to talk to somebody who is checking his messages all the time. Then you have to deliver information in a certain way so that he's interested to hear the ending of it. So yes, every paragraph should have either a lead on to the next paragraph or should have a nice, satisfying conclusion to it.
That's very funny, because I mean, almost today's day and age, it is more important. That skill
Yes,
is so much more important now than before.
True.
And I'm wondering, where have you picked up that?
Well, it's I guess it's human nature. Nowadays, people tweet or they comment on Facebook, or there is an art to even writing clickbait. If you are skillful enough, you can write the right clickbait. You won't believe what this guy did next, or 7 horrifying celebs that have gone through plastic surgery. The way you write it makes the person want to follow on and find out more.
Where did you, I mean, did you form that thought, or did someone, what was that thought?
Oh, I see. So I think a lot of it comes from reading the right things. Even someone like Charles Dickens, when Dickens was writing, he didn't sit down and say, I'm going to write a novel from beginning to end. Dickens wrote for magazines. And so he would serialize his stories just as we watch TV episodes every week. So every week he would write a chapter. And then the challenge is, how do you write it for a newspaper so that people will finish this chapter and they say, oh man, this is really great. I want to read the next chapter and the next chapter. So he wrote it in a way where his chapters ended and you felt that something was resolved, but then you also wanted to know more about the follow-up. So like a good TV series.
And that the follow-up part is already built in
Yes,
into
that's
the
right.
story.
That's right. You kind of like foreshadow it, like, oh, this character is going to be interesting, or this issue is going to come up. Yeah.
Wow. What would have influenced literature heroes
Okay.
that you have back then?
So my favorite author then and now is George Orwell. He wrote Animal Farm, which is my favorite book, and 1984, and many other things.
Brave New World.
That's Aldous Huxley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, another great writer. Yeah. And in the whole area of futurism is quite interesting as well. So George Orwell used to say that good writing is like a window pane. It's like a piece of glass. You can't see it. You can't see good writing. You can only see what is behind it. So bad writing is like a dirty window pane. You can't even see what's outside. You're too distracted by the horribleness of the window itself. So yes, George Orwell.
How did he shape your writing?
George Orwell shaped my writing by writing about themes that concern all of us. A lot of people describe George Orwell as a political writer, which in one sense is true, but in another level, he's just writing about human relationships and human issues like power or love or fear. And he also wrote a lot of essays about writing itself. So it helped me when I read his essays to understand what good writing was.
Oh.
Yes.
Did he have any resources? I mean, I would love to share. I mean,
yes, a lot of George Orwell stuff is out of copyright. So you can get it. You can get it on the internet. I can share some links with you later on, and I'm pretty sure it's available for download. 1984 and Animal Farm are his best works, and Animal Farm is the best because it's written in a very simple way about animals who have taken over a farm. Of course, if you know history, then you will see the parallels between what he's saying and other real life events. But you don't have to know all that. You just have to understand that there are a group of characters, and they had a common goal. They overthrew their oppressor, and then they began fighting among themselves. And the way he tells his story makes you sympathize with one group against another group.
I'm curious to know, what was your first professional piece of writing?
That was in Hwa Chong. So after that, I went to National Service and I started writing for this 2 defunct magazines. One was called Man, M-A-N, and one was called Hot, H-O-T. And I wrote this series called Yuppie Talk. In those days, a yuppie was a young, upwardly mobile professional So the magazines were targeted at people in their 20s who were professionals and who were high-income earners, who drove flashy cars and who would buy the things that these magazines advertised. Beautiful clothes, watches, stuff like that. Very materialistic. But I was nothing like that. I was not in my 20s. I was not a professional, and I didn't have disposable income. So I had to create a persona to write about that lifestyle. And I wrote every month for these magazines.
Did they approach you?
No, I approached them. I approached one of the editors and said, oh, let me contribute. So he says, all right, you write something, and if it's good enough, we'll pay you 15 cents a word. So then I began contributing, and that was how they paid me. That was for the magazine called Man. The other magazine, HOT, H-O-T, is a women's magazine. So I wrote an advice column there called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically women writing in about women issues, and then this man giving totally inappropriate answers to all their issues. Like this woman would write in and say, I have to choose between A and B. A is handsome, rich, and interesting, but he doesn't love me, and B is poor and not very handsome, but he loves me totally, and which should I choose? And then I'll make some inappropriate reference.
So what are your best pieces of advice that you have given?
Well, it's probably very offensive.
Okay.
But the thing is that all these letters were made up, because obviously if you want to do an advice column, how do you get the questions that come in? Then you can reply, right? So the big non-secret is that you have to write your own questions, and then you can supply answers. Then your answers look like they're tailor-made for the questions. So I then pretended to be somebody who was probably middle-aged and who had gone through a lot of relationships and therefore could speak from a position of experience. Then I went on to write for Go magazine.
So that was the advice column was...
Yes, Yuppies, advice columns, the stuff like that. And now,
entrepreneur, you just sort of went into the editor and hello and...
Yeah, it was all hello stuff. I think it's okay in this sort of artsy, righty photography thingy. You can just go and say hello to people, because you can show them your work, and if it's useless or they don't like it, they'll just throw it away.
I mean, I really want to bring it up because how many writers and creatives these days just like, how do I get a start? And
yes.
It, right?
Well, for my time, this was okay. It's harder now because a lot of writing is on the internet, and you can always tell good writing from useless writing, and the problem is not finding the good writing. There's a lot of good writing around. The problem is trying to get paid for it, trying to make a living out of it. Before the internet, magazines actually made money. You could have newspapers with advertisements. You could have TV programs. You could play music and sell CDs, and you could write books and sell books. But with the internet, with the sharing economy, I don't know how magazines will make money, and that translates into I don't know how writers will make money. Because writers used to be paid by magazines. So now instead of writers, we have these things called bloggers. People who write and get paid by their advertisers. But it becomes a little bit seedy because you are reviewing products sometimes because you are sponsored. You're asked to go on a cruise, or you go to a restaurant and you write reviews. Then it's not objective anymore. You're just a hired gun, and you can write very well, but then is what you're writing of any use to anyone? Probably not.
Because the money comes from the advertisers, and if the advertisers doesn't go to the magazine, then the magazine wouldn't make money. Then the magazine would close, and hence wouldn't be able to pay the writers.
So the difference is that in a magazine, there is a layer called the editors. And they would have some level of discrimination. So they'll kind of prevent you from going overboard. And there'll be quality control, and they'll still have, I hope they have ethics, at least some standards that they'll go, okay, we can write this, but this is too blatant, and so on. Imagine a world if we made movies not because of any artistic imperative, but just because the sponsor wants this car, and then the sponsor wants us to be this location and wear this dress and this watch. Oops, I'm talking about James Bond, because James Bond is all about product placement, product placement, product. So then the quality deteriorates. Mm.
I'm going to dig into the formation of the style of your writing,
Right.
A little bit more.
Yes.
So how did that develop and grew into what it is now, your style?
So the secret is 3 words: short attention span. You got to respect your reader's time. If in the old days you can write a 300-page novel, and then your reader can sit in the corner and just plow through it, tiny font size, solid paragraphs, sentences that are more than 50 words long, and not going anywhere. But respect your readers. As Singaporean, I write for Singaporeans because this is my country and I'm a Singaporean. So when I started writing, I wanted to appeal to Singaporeans. At that time, the 1980s, there weren't many novels set in Singapore for Singaporeans. And I felt I wanted young people to have a subject matter that they could relate to, have a voice that sounded familiar to them, and locations that recalled where they were living. So I had to respect my reader. Then I realized straight away that the sort of people who would be reading this would also need to be stimulated by very good writing. In other words, don't use long words. Always get to the point, and let your reader figure stuff out. So you've got to show a clear picture, but you've also got to let the reader work stuff out and form his own opinions. It's more fun that way. So why do we like watching murder mysteries? Because we like to think that we can guess who the murderer is. We can guess who done it. Imagine if you watch a murder mystery where they told you straight off, okay, spoiler alert, this guy did it. It's like, oh, then why am I watching this? That's why we go and watch movies. It's not because we are curious to know what happens at the end. We can just read a movie review or read the spoilers, and we'll know what happened. But we want to have the whole experience of following something through and exercising our mind and reaching a conclusion.
So that is sort of like summarizes what your writing style have developed into.
Yes.
How did that shape over time?
Okay, great.
Yeah. So before when it started, how was it like? And
Yes.
then like the process of it becoming what it is.
I'm probably a better writer now than in the 1980s. So when I was starting, I made a lot of mistakes, and I was still learning how to write stuff. And one of the things I learned over time is that shorter is better. Shorter. Have more complexity, but get to the point faster. So in real terms, that means every time you finish writing something, go back and see what you can remove without changing the meaning. Remove.
Your teenage textbook
Yes.
that you wrote, how many drafts and what was
Okay. So it took about 3 months to write. So I would finish school or come back home, and then I'd have dinner, and from around 7 p.m. to about 10 p.m. I would be writing, and I'll be writing on this, it's called an Amiga computer. I don't know whether you remember, Commodore. It's a very old type of computer with a giant screen, and then I would finish.
Before the Pentium one.
Oh man, it was way before. It was
Okay.
like powered by rubber bands. It's really old stuff.
Wow.
And then I would sit there in the hall of our place, and then I would be tapping away for about 2 to 3 hours. So I would have to be disciplined to say, okay, I've got to do 300-400 pages every day, and maybe more on weekends. And I can't go backwards. I can only go forwards. Because the thing about writing is if you go backwards, if you start saying, I wonder what I wrote yesterday, let me improve it, you'll be still stuck on chapter 1, page 1. So you just have to bash through.
That took like the 3 months of nights.
Yes, 3 months of nights, correct. Where I didn't have much else. Well, I wasn't doing my homework in law school, and I wasn't doing much else.
Yeah. Yes. And the edits after, was that in the 3 months?
No. So then I finished it, and then I gave it to my publisher, who was also my editor, and I also gave it to my wife, who was my girlfriend then, and I got their opinions and what they wanted to change, suggestions.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the payment function.
Oh yeah, sure.
As writers, and maybe that would sort of segue into law.
Okay. So for everybody who writes a novel, I would recommend them to sign a contract where they get either a payment, a fixed amount for their work, or they get a royalty. A royalty means for every book that they sell, the author receives a percentage, usually 10%. So let's say a book sells for $10, then the writer may get a royalty of $1 per book. And publishers, when they publish, they usually publish in something called a print run, which is about 2,000 to 5,000 copies. And if they sell out all their books, then they would reprint, correct. So if someone has a print run of 2,000, the author would make about $2,000, $1 per book, assuming the book's $10.
Actually, to be honest, if you talk about if it's just 2,000, right?
Yes.
And then
It's really tough.
Yeah, correct. Because how many months of work was that for?
Yeah, it was like 3 to 4 months of work. But look, the idea of writing in Singapore especially is very pure. Very few people write because they want to be multimillionaires. It's more like a J.K. Rowling situation, or maybe even purer than that. You have a day job, but you want to write because there's something burning inside you that you need to release, and you want to express yourself. And it's enough that someone likes what you wrote and is willing to publish it into a physical book. That's enough of an achievement. Few people write for money. I even see when people write, we can tell when people are writing for themselves, for an artistic purpose, or for money. You can tell.
Yeah, and also to add on to that point, because it's so hard to find good writing just because of the economy doesn't support it.
Oh, no, that's a very good argument. And the question is, some artists, and I include not just writers, but any type of artist, some artists feel that their art is motivated by a higher purpose. And when we introduce the money element into it, that really ruins everything. So for those sorts of people, you can be a poet, you can be a musician, you just do it because it's beautiful. And so whether you have good quality work, whether you get paid or not, that's the theory. In practice, though, writing novels, which is different from writing poetry, writing novels requires a lot of time. It's a real commitment of a few months. I was involved in the Epigram Literature Award, where they are every year giving a Fantastic Cash Award for the best novel written in the English language in Singapore, and they have got very good entries. A lot of the books that came through that I helped to judge, I was very impressed with. But they were obviously the work of years. Somebody would have a full-time job and then would come home and just be committed enough to spend 3 or 4 hours just working to have this novel take place. And I don't know whether paying people for it makes it better or worse. Where do we find really good literature? In the UK, in the US, people write very well. Sometimes you think of Murakami, or you think of some of the British writers when they write, or the American writers when they write. Are they writing because they want to get a big bestseller? Probably not. I don't get a sense that is uppermost in their minds. So how do they survive? And beats me. We can't give writers grants and say, for 2 years you don't have to work. I'll pay you a salary every month. At the end of 2 years you must produce a book. That's kind of weird, right? That really is not how we see writing. But how else can we do it? Put them on welfare? We can't even guarantee a good writer will produce a good book, because good writers sometimes produce crap books.
I think there are artists, what's that, like scholarship or something, where he stays in
yes, so a writer in residence,
in residence
kind of thing. Yes. Yeah, I don't know enough about that to talk about it. It seems quite pressurizing, though. If you put someone in a room and say, okay, for the next 2 years we're going to pay you, but at the end of it you're going to come up with a book. But
on your point of view, you write really fast then. Like, you wrote it in 4 months.
Okay, so it so happened that I had the time to do that, and I was in law school, which means that I could skip classes and skip assignments and generally not attend to my schoolwork. So I had to pay a price for it.
So now segueing into law.
Right.
Why, what were your motivations when you were choosing law as a career? And what were the alternatives too?
Okay, so there really wasn't much of an alternative. Yeah, I like being a lawyer. I like the part where we meet people and then we help people and get things done. And I also like the drama of it, when you have conflict and you go somewhere and have it resolved. You have it publicly trashed out, and there is a winner and a loser. I like that whole process.
Did you know about that when you were choosing law?
Yes, because strangely enough, law, the legal profession, is one of the most featured professions on TV, in movies, in books. It's like doctors. You kind of know what a doctor does. Oh, somebody got injured. They rush them to emergency, and then this doctor comes out. He wears this green stuff, and then he cuts you open, and then he fixes you. So as a kid, you can understand. Okay, that's what a doctor does. This is what a fireman does. This is what a reporter does. This is what a lawyer does. So it's a very easy job to understand.
The reason I ask is also because, like, do you feel that there's a disparity between the marketing of law on TV shows, which, I mean, maybe now with Suits, back then it was Boston Legal, and the law industry, and hence,
there's a bit of a disconnect if you look at Singapore law versus the American legal dramas that you see on TV, which is why a few years back I helped to conceptualize this TV series called The Pupil, which is available on YouTube. And it was a 2-season thing which showed how a Singapore law practice works. A young trainee lawyer called a pupil joins a Singapore law firm and meets 2 lawyers. One is Adrian Pang and one is Janice Koh. I know, all lawyers look like Adrian Pang, by the way. Just very cool. And then she has Singaporean cases. For example, there was a case about national service. There was this foreigner who was arrested at Changi Airport because he was living in Singapore and he didn't do national service. And his argument is, yes, but I'm not a Singaporean citizen, why should I do national service? So there's a Singaporean question. There was another one where this parent sued the school because the school didn't admit his child, even though as a parent he contributed a lot of time and effort to do all this ECA. And so he accused the school of discriminating against him because he was Indian. He was, and the school principal was Chinese, and stuff like that. Very Singaporean themes. So I helped to try and bridge that gap.
Yeah, with the pupil.
Yes, it's available on YouTube.
Yeah, please watch it. We'll link it. We'll send me the link.
Oh, great!
Yeah,
Brilliant,
we'll
brilliant.
show notes.
Yes, I really like it. So I also write sometimes about what law is like, practicing law, what the function is, the role in society, because I do want the public to understand what the legal system is all about, why it's there to help them and solve problems.
Before we go full in on lawyering, I just remembered this question that someone wrote to me, which it's actually my question too.
Okay.
I noticed you have a lot of like social cultural reference and observations sprinkled into your writing.
Right.
Is that something you take note of it every day, or it just comes to you when you're writing?
Second one, it just comes to me when I'm writing. That's because I think writing is a lot like having a conversation. When you talk to your friends, you do reference whatever happens to you. So if you like football, then when you talk about something, you'll have a football reference. Like, oh, this reminds me of the time when this manager took charge of this team or something. Or this reminds me of the latest Tom Hanks movie. Or this reminds me of the lyrics of this song where they said blah, blah, blah. And I think it's very natural. And if you read Shakespeare did it too, and most writers do it because they have to provide a context for their audience. So this is all about understand your audience, understand your readers, find out what they want. So it is natural. I think there was a long debate a long time ago about writing in Singlish. There were two schools of thought. One is that we should write with Singapore social cultural references and Singlish because this is who we are. And the other school of thought is that no, we should write internationally because we want our literature to be available on a world stage. And if we confine ourselves to Singapore references and Singlish, then we would have a very limited readership. So there's this debate going on. It's been going on forever. Government is part of that debate. They are kind of not in favor of Singlish. Well, I'm on the Speak Good English movement, which means that I push for people to learn how to use English properly, a standard English. And I also see a very big role for Singlish. But I worry that there are a lot of Singaporeans who use Singlish when they think they're using English. Then they get into problems, and then they can't express themselves well, and that's not a good thing. So I want to preserve Singlish, and I also want people to understand that it's not English.
I read your article on Straits Times on July on the lawyer.
Yes.
I really should link it. It's a great article.
Oh, thanks. Yes. The hired friend.
Yes.
Yes.
To what degree of truthness is there in?
I only write 100% truth. I'm a very truthful person. A lawyer is your friend that you can hire. So it's sometimes, we don't. I think I have about 3 friends. After 50 years of living, I guess I have about 3 friends. And I know people who have a few more friends, and I know people who have 0 friends. Those people who say they have 1,000 friends or 100 friends on Facebook, those are not real friends. Friends are people who, it's not about feeling, it's about what they do for you, how they care for you, how they protect you, how they stand by you and give you support and make you happy. So if we have one friend in our lives, we're very, very, very lucky. And I'm lucky because I have more than one friend. But sometimes there are people who don't have friends or don't have enough friends, and then they get into trouble. Then they need friends. This is where lawyers come in.
Right.
you can hire a friend. It's good, isn't it? Because it's so hard to go out and meet a friend and then get common interests and build up some relationship and have the level of trust that you need from a friend. You may have grown up your whole life surrounded by idiots or very unfriendly people. Then it's your bad luck.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we have the legal profession.
Also, you painted the legal profession
Yes.
as quite depressing. If I were a lawyer and I would look at it, I was like, okay, I might not want to
You think so?
be a lawyer. So I mean, was it to deter the wannabe lawyers to not be lawyers then?
I don't see it that way. It's a service industry.
Okay.
Every service industry. Let's think of nursing. I mean, if I've often wondered, this is a very tough profession, nursing. I've often wondered, so you're a nurse, what do? You do a lot of tough stuff. I mean, you're around sick people all the time. You've got to be very positive. You clean up after them. You get dominated by doctors, not a good thing. And it's not like your salary is damn good either. Plus, you've got to wear these freaky nurse outfits. Invites a lot of improper comments. But glossing over that, but people do it. And I think when you talk about nursing, it's not to turn people off. It's actually to praise them, to say, well, it's kind of a tough job that you do. So most service industries, from being wait staff, being a stewardess, it's all about subordinating your needs to that of somebody else. Actually, I think it's a very high human calling for us.
Because also, I mean, you spoke about the Manalians, and I do have a
Yes.
few. I do want to tell you. So I'm a wedding planner by day.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah, and
happy job.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So one day I received a beautiful hand type
Yes.
job applicant over to me, and then
That's nice.
I read there was she was a lawyer. So I have no clue about what is it like to be a lawyer. So I went to approach my lawyer friends and see what does all this mean.
A lawyer applied to be a wedding planner.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. And I was surprised of, well, one, the working hours, and then two, the amount of salary they are getting.
That's another laughable. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one I would say it's probably one of the best paid profession in the professional industry.
I worked it out before. That's
Yeah?
not true.
That's not true.
If you go by hours, the manager of a McDonald's makes more than an associate in a law firm. If you go by hourly rate.
But I mean, we look at associate, then we look at senior, and then we look at salary partner. Then that is where the difference comes, right?
If you look at it that way though, then you might there are many more ways to make money than being a lawyer. And right off starting, if you can choose to go to law school or choose to go to just have a general arts degree and then go and work and say, I only want to work this number of hours a week, which pays better, be a manager at McDonald's, be a fast food restaurant manager rather than an associate.
Yeah. So coming back to the story, which is I tell her, like I'm not able to pay you as much as what you're getting. So is this like, I mean, I'm telling the truth, and so I was also surprised by the working hours that one need to put in, and also I was doing my research on Drew and Napier where you were at before.
Right. Yes, my old firm.
Yeah, correct.
Yes.
And my friend was like commending. I was like, oh, you must have worked really hard.
It's true.
We just paint a day, like.
So
like, what was that working hour?
So I think people work hard in many jobs, and the reason people work hard or not is not because of money. There are very lazy lawyers, and even though they're paid very well, they're lazy. Versus there are very hardworking people in other jobs who are not paid as well. And you can't tell someone to work harder, just as you can't tell someone don't work so hard. A person works as hard as he wants to. It's all about the passion.
What motivates you?
So I meet a lot of people in my line of work, and they have problems, and I like to solve their problems. I don't always solve their problems, but I just like to meet people.
Do you think that the work-life balance is over romanticization
So this is a complete myth. This idea of work-life balance, and I want to say to you that work-life balance is an invention of the 21st century that never existed before. Because think about it, when early man started cultivating land and became from hunter-gatherers, we became farmers. There was no such thing as having a weekend or having days off. There was no such thing as work-life balance. You worked every day. You worked every day. You woke up early. You had to tend to your farm, or you could go out and practice your craft. And if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And then in I think only recently in the 20th century, we began to have this idea that we could work in mass production, we could work in factories, and then we would have days where we work and days that we don't work. Then we have something called weekends, we have something called vacations. But that's a fairly recent phenomena. And then we began to have ideas that parents have to be home and have dinner with their kids. This is actually quite new if you think about Asian society. It didn't always work that way. I don't know. If you look at Asian society, this idea of having vacations, holidays, I'm pretty sure that it's a Western concept. Anyway, the point really is work is part of life. It's not the anti-life. If you want to balance work and life, it means you're suggesting that when you work, you don't have a life. But a lot of our life exists within our work, just as what you do. This forms part of your identity. You don't say to yourself, "Oh, I'm dying to finish this interview and get on with what I really want to do." This is what you want to do. This is your life. So there isn't a balance. Work, life, same thing.
How about the notion of work and break? Because
yes.
then you work really long hours. I mean,
Yes.
more than just long hours, it's also
Yes.
mentally
Yes.
taxing.
So, good point.
Yeah.
There's times we spend in the office, for me, doing stuff, writing stuff, talking to people, working stuff out. And then there's times I spend away from the office where I talk to my friends, or I watch TV, or I sleep, or exercise. But it's a 24-hour job in the sense that I'm always thinking about my work. So this is different from being in a factory. And this is where the concept of work-life balance comes from. I think if you work on a production line, you work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a 1-hour break. Work. You finish your work at the factory, you take off your overalls, and then you go home. You don't do any more work. It's gone. The work is in the factory. But those are people who work with their hands or with their bodies. And you work with your brain, and I work with my brain. So when it comes to 5 o'clock, we don't say, I'll stop thinking about what's occupied me for 8 hours a day. You don't say, I'll stop thinking about planning tomorrow's events. I just stop. I can switch it off. No, it carries on. It dwells in your mind. So we don't have a break from brain work.
Interesting enough. So, since you mentioned that, maybe what are some of the most common personality or perspective mismatch with millennials? Well, you just said one, right? Which is the myth of the work-life balance the law industry and the millennium lawyers. And I ask this also because I have many friends who left, who became creative. They shoot photos, but they end up, with this 4 years or 5 years of intensive training with the law. I mean, not to say that the training is gone, but because it is a lot of time that's being invested, and if it's something that they could know from the start that they would not like to be working 24/7 thinking about the subject, then we can save that time to make them be more productive.
So let me say something to defend millennials, and that's this. Every generation that goes through being teenagers and 20-something, they get condemned by the older generation, right? Every generation. From the post-war baby boomers, when they came out, when they were growing up, they were teenagers in the 50s, they were condemned by their elders who went through the war. And no, you don't know anything. Of course, though that Second World War generation were condemned by their parents because their parents said, oh, we were migrants. We came from China to come to Singapore. You don't know how good your life is. And then the baby boomers grew up post-war, and then they had babies during independence times. And then they told their kids, wow, you guys don't know how lucky you were. Now you're born in modern Singapore. Like my parents used to say, you don't have to carry water. We had to carry water all the time. We had to kill chickens. And it was a big deal. Apparently, the water carrying duties were endless. So we were told over and over again how lucky we are. And then we do the same to our young people. When they're 20, man, you'll have it so good. You got internet. You get all the information in the world on your fingertips. You can study anything you like. I'm giving you all these opportunities. You have tuition. You get breaks and stuff. Not like my time. And then we denigrate the younger generation because that is what human beings like to do. And when this younger generation starts working, they get to their middle age, they get families, and then they say, okay, now's our chance to differentiate ourselves from the next generation. So there's Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and the millennials. And each generation wants to be superior to the next generation. So what do we do with the millennials? Or we say, well, they're very entitled. What does that mean? Oh, well, they feel that the world should be a certain way. And I'm like, yes, that's true. But when you were young, you also had ideals. You also had beliefs and aspirations. Because when you're young, you're optimistic. You want change. And every generation goes through that. In the 70s, the people who protested the Vietnam War were 20-somethings, were teenagers. So they were the ones who showed the conscience of the world and said, you should do things like this. It's always the young people that have the biggest hearts. And then as they get older, we start to work on them and we start to disillusion them and we start to tell them, it's not as good as you think it is. The world will never change, and just be like us and just keep your dreams small. So for the millennials, we're now giving it to them. The whole world we've given them a label. That's the first step, millennial. Second, we pick on stuff that we used to do, but we say it's them. Oh, you people, you work very hard, but you like to take a break and you like to change your careers. Excuse me, this is not the first generation that changes careers. Young people change their careers. And young people are always searching for something. And they will settle down. And they will be different from you. That's the whole point of being young. So what we should do is we should appreciate and treasure what they have at this moment when they're young and they haven't been whacked by the world, when they still have their eyes open and they can still ask questions. We should treasure that and say, okay, tell us what you think. We've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. The world isn't that great. It's not perfect. So you tell me your ideas. And we should listen to them instead of making fun of them. But we'll keep doing that. And the millennials will do that to another generation too.
So come back to the question whereby, do you find that there are any, like a personality mismatch?
Yes.
Or
yes.
what are most of the common ones that, that you observe? And maybe you think, okay, this person, is not cut out for this.
The young people that work for me, work with me nowadays. So I'm 50, and I have associates in their 20s, 30s, and they're very hardworking. Yeah. They're driven by passion. That means they have to believe that what they're doing is morally right. So in law, it means you have to believe that your client is not a crook, is really truthful and has integrity. And if my associates don't feel that way, I always use them as a barometer. I use them as a way of reminding me whether I'm working for the good guys or the bad guys. So they have a good a good indicator of whether I'm working for good guys or bad guys, and they'll tell me. They work very hard, but they also need to. They like to learn stuff, so they want to know stuff. They're interested in stuff, and so I have to constantly to keep. Yes, I have to impart. Correct. That's perfect word. And I recommend that for people of my generation. If we have younger people working for us, we got to keep transferring the knowledge and say, hey, in this situation, I remember we did it this way. So this is some information that you can use and build on it.
Conversely, then
Yes.
what would be like some good personality types, or what's your person that is coming into the law industry be excited about, or like that's the reason, that should be the reason why you are here?
Okay, you can't hate people. If you work in law, yeah, you gotta be a sympathetic person or empathetic person. It means that so in To Kill a Mockingbird, the novel by Harper Lee, Scout, the main protagonist, talks to her father, Atticus Finch, who is a lawyer, inspirational character, and she's talking about how there's a race there's a race conflict in her town, and her father says you can't really judge someone until you get into his shoes, and what he means is you have to see things from people's perspective. You have to have empathy. That's the modern word for it. So to be a good lawyer, you have to empathize. You have to empathize with a person at his lowest psychological ebb, maybe at a time where he's made a lot of mistakes, or he's had very bad misfortune, and you have to figure out how he got there, and then you have to explain that to somebody else. You have to explain that to a judge.
And also being persuasive.
Yes, that's right. That's where it comes in.
The economy of word, asking good questions.
Yeah, you have to know how to use this big tool called the English language.
And even thinking clearly too.
That's right. That's right. And thinking clearly is not so theoretical. It's thinking clearly about very practical things. Like, why did this person do this thing? Why did this person make friends with another person or have conflict with another person? And you have to understand your client better than maybe he understands himself.
Now you are in IT and IP,
Yes.
which is sort of like the startup scene.
Yeah, a little bit.
So many lawyers come to me and saying that the client always come to them at the wrong time. They should have come earlier.
That's very true.
Maybe just let's start on that, and like what are some things that they should come earlier of, and maybe let's sort of tell them that.
Well, straight off, people don't like to see lawyers, right? Don't like to see dentists. You see a dentist, for some people, only when you have a problem. And then the dentist says, I should come earlier. And if you go and see the dentist earlier, the dentist will submit you to a humiliating examination and then comment on all your failings in dental hygiene and tell you to do stuff like floss. Very unappetizing. So you go and see a lawyer, you have a business idea, right? I'm going to start a new business. I'm going to do this, do that, do this, do that. And then somebody says, okay, but before you do that, let's go and see a lawyer. It's like pouring cold water on you. Go there, oh, what now? Then the lawyer says, oh, okay, you better have this contract and this thing, and you have to make a decision on this, and make sure you sign this, you sign. And then you're like, oh, come on, man. I've got a great idea. I'm going to start up. This is going to change the world. I don't remember Steve Jobs sitting in a lawyer's office for 10 hours a day, man. He was out there, he was inventing iPads and iPods. I'm wasting my time. Come on, I've got these great ideas. I've got a group of people I can trust, and we're just going to go with it. Okay, we'll solve the problem when it happens, all right? We're not going to pre-solve anything and like spend $1 million on you. Well, and I can understand that feeling, right? When you want to do something, you just go and do it. And the lawyer sounds like a like a kiasu kind of wet blanket, always telling you the downside and what terrible things could happen. You don't need that, right? The whole world is telling you why your startup's going to fail. You don't need to hire somebody to tell you that.
So when would be the time then?
From the beginning, but people are not going to do that, all right? They will not do it. I can predict it 99% of the time. People don't go and see their dentist, and they don't go and see their lawyer.
Let's just like put on that fact that people don't. Right. Then let's make it easy for them, because lawyers are expensive. Firstly, so do you think that there is like any cheat sheets they could?
Sure.
Right? You know, like maybe a contract where you find that this repository, they could at least have some form of defense without paying the upfront. Because the main thing was, other than the cold blanket, is the cost.
One of the best lawyers is called Google. And if you're going to do something, and for some reason you don't want to see a professional, you want to do it yourself, then at least do your research. If you want to start a company with somebody else, then you need to have a contract. And you need to spell out what your partner is going to do, what you're going to do, and things going forward. And a lot of good things on the internet that you can find if you want to do it. But you know what? You know what costs more? Doing it yourself or getting a trained professional to do it? Which costs more? It's doing it yourself. Mm-hmm. Because you don't even know where to look. You're going to waste a lot of your time. And when you're a startup, the one most valuable thing that you want is not capital. All right, you can get capital, you can raise funds, you can find people to invest. What you don't have is time, is your mind share. You want to devote 100% of your mind to launching your startup. You're not going to spend 50% of the time solving legal problems that some guy has done before. You can do it in 10 minutes. So why go and do another person's job? We spent 4 years training for this, plus another 4 or 5 years just learning the ropes, so that we can get to a point where we can tell you how to do it. Why do you want to reinvent the wheel?
I think, also the cost side being startup where there's no capital, right?
It's a trade-off between time and capital. So which one's more important for you? The other thing is it's a preventive measure. That if you see the right lawyer at the beginning, you will not have problems down the road. But nobody's going to tell you that, because nobody's going to sit around and say, I avoided having this multi-million-dollar legal problem because I saw this. No, because they didn't have the problem.
What would be the minimal, you think? In terms of just cost.
Right. If you want to start up, then you should have a contract between you and your shareholders to understand who is supposed to do what, who is supposed to contribute what. And then if it depends on what sort of business areas you're in, but you've got to make sure you get the right licenses and permits, and you hire the right people, and you avoid doing stuff that you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is ambiguity of spending a lot of money and them not knowing what is this a lot of money. Is it 10,000?
Yes.
Is it 1,000? Yes. Or is it $500?
Yes. So you can get a quote from a lawyer. Like different dentists charge different amounts. So you can talk to a lawyer and say, hey, what's the... And most lawyers will be able to tell you, okay, normally when you start a new company, you got to look at this, it costs this much, this.
Okay, I think that's a really good advice. I think just going for a quote.
Yeah, just get a quote.
Yeah, even then you will learn what you need.
Yes.
Then if you want to do it yourself, then you'll be able to know what you are looking for.
Yes. So you got to treat your lawyer as your collaborator and your partner, because he's going to... First, you have to let him understand your business. And if he doesn't get your business, that should ring alarm bells, because lawyers know a lot. They've seen a lot of businesses. So if your startup sounds funny to your lawyer, it's weird. You should rethink it. And second, you can tell him what your plans are, and he can probably tell you what's doable and what's not doable, because he would have seen. Oh yeah, yes, I know a client who went into Vietnam and this, or he encountered this problem, so you better watch out for it. So your lawyer is like a collaborator. He also has a stake in your company, and he also has experiences to bring to the table.
But even then, I also heard of cases where law firms actually become a stakeholder,
Yes, yes.
and that happens too.
Yes, it's not common,
Yeah.
but it happens. If the lawyer is really excited by your business.
The relevance or the overlaps that you see in the writing and in the legal.
Okay, so nowadays a lot of legal practice involves writing. And in the old days, you will see lawyers going to court, talking a lot, and winning because of their beautiful voices and the way they can speak and grip you. But nowadays, it's all done through writing. So the best lawyers are very careful how they write, because they're writing for people who are very busy, who also have a short attention span, who are very intelligent, and they have to communicate things in a very persuasive way.
Then the differences, or what I see is one is creative
Yes.
and the other is logical,
Yes.
right? How do you balance that, or do you even balance at all?
It's an interesting dichotomy. If you think that creative writing is divergent, if you think that way, yes, then it's different. But not all creative writing is divergent. Some creative writing is writing to make an argument or writing to persuade you. So back to my favorite novel, Animal Farm. George Orwell wrote Animal Farm because he wanted to make an argument that the revolution in the Soviet Union was a failure and was nothing more than a repeat, rather than a demolition or removal of the capitalist system. It was just replacing one elite with another elite. So the class structure was still in place. Okay, so George Orwell wanted to make this argument. You can say it's a lawyer's argument or it's a historian's argument, but it's still an argument. Yeah. It's not creative in the traditional sense. It's scientific, logical, historical. But he used creativity to get to that point. So I think lawyers do it that way too, that they have a point and they want to find a way to get you to understand the point.
In terms of time management, do you have any advice for that on how to segregate this to?
I'm really bad at time management. I think just to generalize, we probably need more training in school about time management. In school, we learn a lot of useless subjects in school, and school is an example of very, very bad time management. The amount of time that we spend teaching kids useless stuff is amazing. So in school, we studied things like differentiation, we studied things like quadratic equations, we studied physics to a very high level, or chemistry. Totally useless, all right? You don't need to know all that stuff. What we need to study in school, stuff like time management, we need to study financial management. How to manage our own lives so that we don't get into debt, we don't get into financial trouble, so that we can invest and have enough money to retire. We have to teach kids that. We have to teach kids how to relate to other people, to have social skills, to be courteous, to be civic-minded. We have to teach kids to become good citizens, just to be able to introduce themselves to other people. And we have to teach kids about things like love and human reproduction and hygiene and food and health, and how not to eat the wrong things and get really fat and ruin their lives. We're not teaching our kids any of that. All the important stuff we're letting them learn on their own behind the garden shed. And we're spending useless time teaching them quadratic equations.
I just want to respect your time. Also, yeah.
Sure. I think we're okay.
Oh, we're okay? Okay. Let's do a quick turn. Yes. And move into the thing that we wanted to talk about. Okay. Politics. Just ask a few questions of that. Sure. I saw your speech on the one that you did for the interpretation of the story for George Orwell.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So much to ask, but maybe.
Is it on YouTube?
Yes, it is on YouTube.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. We have cultivated a bunch of smart people, and so many of those you mentioned don't take action on the important.
Oh, I see.
Hence, intelligence becomes useless.
Yes, that's right.
So then, and you say that the intelligence are complacent and
Yes.
cynical
Yes.
in this society. Well,
Yes.
why do you think so? And like what is stopping them? It's just a two-part question.
Right. Okay. So in Singapore, we place a high value on education, and we equate it with some sort of benefit for society. We pick very smart kids and we call them scholars. We label them, you are scholars, you are superior to everyone. We're going to pay for your education, send you overseas, give you all the best opportunities. You come back and make our society better. And for decades, we're doing that. And I really like to ask, well, what have you done for us? What's our returns? I really need to know. Because sometimes I think we have a society of very intelligent people who have become very cynical, and they don't come forward to express ideas on how our country is being shaped or how it's turning out.
I mean, this is a step in the dark. Why do you think so?
Well,
Is it, well, I'm making assumptions here, but is it the golden handcuff? Because they are locked into this lifestyle of wealth and just having beautiful things and eating nice food, and hence not being able to spare the time out? Or is it the time they don't, just being a lawyer takes a lot of time, or neither, or a doctor?
It's I'll give you the answer, which is actually a theme of many things. It's the government's fault, but I don't mean it the way people mean it. In Singapore, we've become a society where we have this great reliance on the government to provide solutions, to identify problems, and to guide us forward. Every time something goes wrong, it's the government's fault. Every time something goes wrong with the haze, we say, oh, well, the government should do something about it. Go talk to the Indonesians. And every time something goes wrong, like the Zika virus, oh, the government should do something about it.
So it creates an over-reliance.
It does, and it's really the wrong mindset, because it then stops us thinking of solutions for ourselves. It stops us identifying problems for ourselves. It stops us even spelling out priorities for ourselves, because this country is our responsibility.
But that's really hard, because then you're just naming things that a good government does.
Yes, so we can have a debate about what we want a government to do. There's a very basic level of government that maybe we want, which is to provide security. I mean, national defense, and security in the form of having a police force, applying law and order.
Yep.
And that's it. That's it. The rest of the stuff, maybe the government should get out of the way. Maybe public housing, maybe public transport. Not every country has public housing or public transport. Right now, the government is trying to grapple with things like Uber, whether to have Airbnb, whether to allow people who live in housing estates to have Airbnb. That's good, that's bad. And sometimes I think it's not really the government's problem. It's a social problem. And we should offer up our ideas too. We shouldn't sit around and say, okay, let's wait for the government to come up with a solution so that we can criticize the government.
So what do you think then is the government's stake in this part of the solution? To guide as a meandering guide?
Well,
solutions?
I don't think the government knows, and I don't think we know.
Yeah. No one knows the answers to the first world problem.
Well, in America, for example, right now the feeling is government generally is not a good thing. I'm not saying that they think that their government is doing a bad job. That happens every election. But they are actually beginning to think that maybe we should not have so much government. Same with the UK, when they voted for Brexit. There was this feeling that we don't really trust the government anymore. We may not need the government to do so much. Right now in Singapore, we've evolved in a certain way. We've evolved in a way where we become very reliant on the government. And that's, as you say, because we have government that's very comprehensive, that they go into every aspect of society and
Engineer it.
they try to engineer it, and we kind of have confidence that they're run by smart people, but at the same time, we're kind of very critical of them, and so we've become a society where if we see a problem, we don't think of solution. We see a problem, we highlight it, and we criticize it, and then we blame, and that doesn't lead us anywhere.
I feel that we need to come back for a round two because there's so much more interesting things that you can share and we can debate about. I mean, even then, yeah, even then, the question of what's important then,
Right.
what wrong things are we caring about? What unimportant things that we are putting too much emphasis on?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, maybe a round two. Let me just do a quick round of questions.
Oh.
So the one that we initially, the quick fire question.
Yes.
Books or documentary you like to recommend?
Wow. Okay, so I do recommend Animal Farm
Okay.
by George Orwell. Yes.
What have you bought most recently under $100
Well, so
that have
I-
impacted you the most?
I bought a handphone cover for my Samsung. I got a new Samsung, and it's not the one that's the hottest phone in the world. That's a really hot product. No, I got a keyboard that makes my Samsung look like a BlackBerry. It's got a physical keyboard. This is not the Samsung. Anyway, the point of it is that it's under $100, and it's because no one else makes physical keyboards anymore.
Yeah, do you still use a Samsung now or you are using BlackBerry?
Well, I'll use my BlackBerry until it dies. Then I'll use the Samsung with a physical keyboard. And what it does is it allows me to type without looking when you have a physical keyboard. And that's very good in court because you can pretend to be paying attention when you're actually writing some long email.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any advice for your 18-year-old self and 30 and place us?
Yeah. I think if I could travel back in time and I could talk to my old self, I'll probably tell him just be positive and helpful. And everything will turn out okay in life if you are positive and helpful. And if you're negative and unfriendly, nothing's going to come out of it. When we're young, we are very defensive and insecure because we're growing and going to be adults. And sometimes we think, I better create a shell. I better withdraw. I better distance myself from the rest of society. And be cynical. And I'll probably say, no, don't do that. Just open up.
When you think of the word successful, who came into your mind and why?
Oh, well, anyone who has a lot of time is a successful person. And time equals freedom. I'm very short of time. And our time here on earth can be very limited. You can be as rich and successful as you like, but if you don't have any time, then you're a failure.
Any routines or habits that you find important?
I think it's very important for everyone to wake up 1 hour later in the morning. Just, if you're supposed to wake up at 8, just lay there in bed, 8:05, 8:15. Just let it sink. The world's not ending. Nothing bad will happen.
Just feel it, right?
Just let your heartbeat slow down, breathe a bit. You'll live longer.
Good advice there. What are some of the most common misconceptions about you or your work?
Oh, okay. So a lot of people think lawyers have to be disagreeable, fierce, antagonistic. But it works better if we are friendly and agreeable. The legal community in Singapore is very small. We know everyone, and most of the time we get along, and it helps to solve problems if you're a nice person.
Any say or do for the audience?
Oh, well, I apart from recommending people to sleep 1 hour later, I also think that people should spend an hour a day not doing very much. Just, I call it vegetating, just sitting around and not thinking, not doing anything.
Like meditation?
Like meditation. Actually, that's probably a higher form of meditation. Yeah.
Where can people find you or your project in the interwebs?
Oh, okay. On the interwebs, I think my book isn't available, but the movie of my book is on YouTube.
Yep.
It was made in 1998.
is available.
Oh, is it right?
It's so I bought it on Popular web store. I put a link there.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm very grateful because people always ask me. I think it's in Popular. I think it's in Kinokuniya. It's not on Amazon because it's such an old book. It's not on Kindle or anything like that. Anybody wants to convert it to Kindle, let me know. Someone once asked me to sign an autographed copy of my book that was photocopied. It was very nicely photostated with the cover and everything. I was like, oh, this is pretty impressive. It costs more to photocopy it than to buy it.
Anywhere else?
No, but YouTube, watch the movie. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Great. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thanks very much, Brian. It's really fun.
You should do a round 2